All right, ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
I cheated.
Hit.
Go. I cheated. That was scissors. Go.
That
Ready?
was his. Oh,
I did scissors. Oh, I needed. Okay. I'm gonna call it out. Ready?
yes.
Okay.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
All right. Paper. I won.
Oh,
Go ahead.
hello and welcome to another Duke and Howie podcast. We're happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to talk about things. We're excited to have you guys listen to us. Tonight's topic of conversation is going to be church. We're going to talk about church. We're going to talk about the church. We're going to talk about church things. We're going to talk about how we feel about church. We're going to talk about how we feel about how other people feel about church.
Just
And
everything to do with church.
yeah, everything to do with church. Whatever we decide to talk about.
Man,
That's right.
that was really official, Noah.
Thank you.
Dang, that was good.
Thank you.
That
I want
was
to be thorough.
that was I realized that we need to start calling each other by our channel names or our famous names, as I like to call them.
Oh yeah,
So from here on out, you shall call me the Duke and
the Duke,
the Duke. Yeah, I like that. The Duke.
and I'm Howie. I'm not the Howie though. I'm Howie. I'm like the jester.
Yes, the Duke.
You know,
The Duke and the Jester.
well,
But not. It's not a superiority thing, you know.
no,
So
of course not.
no. Anyhow, man, I really love this topic. I've talked to a lot of people about it. It's a pretty controversial topic actually, because you have people that love the way church is done now, and then you have people that hate it, and then you have all the people in between who have never thought about it.
Right,
So I guess
and we have
go ahead.
we have so many different kinds of church.
Right.
You know,
So what does church mean to you, man?
um, man. All right. So tonight, before we were getting together on the podcast, I was talking to my dad about church, just because it was on my mind because that's what we decided we were going to talk about tonight.
Right.
And he told me, and this is how I feel about church. I think I wrote it down here. He said that a speaker, a guy named Floyd McClung, this is what he said: church is simply this: two believers meeting together in any place. And so to me, it means a church. Church is when believers get together and meet in a place.
Right. Yeah. I heard this that phrase a lot. You know, church is the people and not the building. That cliche. It's kind of a cliche at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
And so I hear people, and I like that definition a lot. You know, two people that come together to talk about Jesus. That's the church. Do you think that that's what's going on? Because I don't think that that's the church right now. I think it's a nice thing to say, but
Well, what do you mean?
well, I think that a lot of people, if you have this idea that the church is two or more people coming together to worship Jesus, then those two people, I feel like, or to talk about Jesus or believers coming together, actually, I think it's a number of things, really. Like if you can come together and eat, and that could be church, right? As long as it's something that's honoring. And I believe that those people would at least have to be aware that that's what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like that has to be their thought process of like, I'm going to come together with people and just hang out, and I'm going to throw another Christianese word out there, fellowship, right? We're going to fellowship together. And that has to be like an intention, right? Like
Well, I
everybody
think you can. I think you can be intentional about it. I don't think it has to be though.
do you
I
think
think that like,
do you think people accidentally church? Like, whoops.
yeah, dude. I think you and I are churching right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would say, dude, what's a sermon is just a guy that is talking about these kinds of things. He's
Yeah.
preaching, talking about the gospel and defining things and about God to help people, grow a little deeper in
Mm-hmm.
understanding. Give them maybe some tools, things like that. I think that's what we're doing. This is almost like it's like a sermon. It's just a different format. It's not traditional.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I just want to discuss, because me, I'm on the flip side of things. I'm kind of a skeptic, of the modern church, of the way that church, the institution and organization is today. I'm kind of skeptical,
Right.
and so, and I have a few reasons for that. I like the idea, the phrase, church is the people, not the building. I just feel like it's one of those things that's not being lived out.
Right.
Yeah. So I think people like to say it, but they don't like to live it, or they don't know how. And I think that's my issue.
Right. All right. That's good. And well, so my issue is that I need to say this, and I think I might be speaking for both of us when I say this, but we don't have incredibly developed opinions about the church and things like that. We're discussing these things openly, and we're not experts or professionals in church studies or anything like that. But one of my fundamental issues with right now in regards to the church is the people's attitude towards it. I hear a lot of people like scoff at the idea of going to church and being a part of church, and not just people, but like obviously not just people, but Christians specifically, especially my generation. Like a lot of like Christian college students that I'm friends with will just talk terrible about the church, saying they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. They have a lot of things to say about what the church is doing wrong. And that's my issue, because I fundamentally believe that the church is comprised of individuals, and that because of that, the issues that you see in the church come down to an individual problem.
Yeah.
And it's actually up to you how the church does.
Yeah.
And it's not the church's fault, it's your fault. That's how you should see it, at least. You need to take personal responsibility for the issues at hand. And the reason I believe that is because I believe that's exactly what Christ did. I think that to embody personal responsibility is exactly what Christ did. I think Christ accepted that life is suffering. He chose to transcend it, and he chose to take responsibility for all the things wrong with society and the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is symbolically, Christ took these burdens upon his back. He took personal responsibility without blaming anybody for it, and chose to bear that burden willingly. And he transcended that suffering, and then he died and resurrected. And that dying and resurrection symbolizes the things about you that are holding you back from being able to take those responsibilities, or being able to grow, and things that are holding you back from growing, and dying to them, and then resurrecting as the new individual on the other side. And it's painful to realize that something you believed your whole life was wrong, but you need to die to that. It's like this little part of you that you have to die to that. And so this is, long to make it long story short here. I think that it's up to the individual, and it makes me kind of like agitated when I hear people talking so badly about the church, because it's not the church, it's you. You need to take up that responsibility.
And that's a really interesting point, Noah. I think that and I'm glad that you made it. In no way is this particular episode of this podcast meant to just bash the church. That's not what we're doing. Trying to figure out because it's like so amoebus. You know what I mean? It's like this church is like this thing that's fluid. It's not necessarily something that you can pinpoint, because it's going to be different depending on culture and region, language. The church is going to be expressed differently.
Right. And because it's made up of the individuals, and and we embody a culture, where the culture that we're at, right? We are the culture. So it's always going to be different no matter where you go. And so to some degree, the issues could be cultural.
Right. That's an interesting thing, though, is I never, and I just realized, or, just thought about this, is maybe the reason that, church today, like I'm in the Midwest, and Noah is on the East Coast. And so, or Howie is on the East Coast. I'm going to correct myself every time. So if you're going to be annoyed by that, sorry.
No problem. The Duke.
So Howie's on the East Coast, and it's really important that the church culture is different on both sides, and the reason I'm making this point, but I think that that church today, the reason that we have to have a building and the program and the worship and all that stuff, for a lot of people to view the church as being credible, is because we are an incredibly industrious nation. That's like an incredibly industrious approach. Right. So we see like our culture, our industry, and we see kind of like, I feel like we see a lot of capitalism kind of seep into the church. a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, well, dude, so this is another thing that I was like talking about with my dad. I was saying like, because to me, like I hear, so I've engaged people about, okay, what are the problems with the church? Like, what do you think's wrong with it? And hundreds of reasons. There's pastors that are cheating on their wives. There's spiritual manipulation happening. There's the capitalism. Pastors get greedy and they make money off their congregation. And I'm like, what's different about those problems? Like in the Old Testament, they were literally just gathering like a pastor would, or a prophet or a member of the Bible, like they congregated in a valley of rocks, and they all had the same problems going on in their churches too.
Right. And it's nothing new.
It's nothing new. It's always been this way. Those problems are always going to exist because that's the human condition. And I'm not making an excuse for sin. What I'm saying is you have to, it's a bigger and deeper issue than that. It's a matter of forgiveness, and it's a matter of responsibility coinciding. They're working together in a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
So you need to take responsibility and forgive. You have to be the Habakkuk in every time.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree
Especially
with I agree with that, man. You're really helping me out here, Noah, or Howie. Because I never really thought about the church as we know it today, particularly in the Midwest, as being an expression of the culture here. And there are people here that really love their church. They love the building. They love the music. They love the worship. They love the pastors. They love the community, right? They love it all. And I just never thought about how that is an expression of our culture. Like we're not in China. You know what I mean? We're not in the foothills of China.
And that church looks totally different.
Yeah. They're hiding in caves, with pieces of the Bible, things that they can fold up and put in their pocket. You know what I mean? Like it's not like that here, and so we've taken full advantage of that. So I think we're kind of seeing, if we were to view it as like a pendulum, we're seeing like the extreme freedom, right, of expression with this church, and that makes me kind of appreciate it a little bit more. I'm not saying it's the right way to do things, because I think what we're saying is there's no right way. There's no singular, because the early church, people always want to go to the Acts church, right? That's a big deal, the Acts church, but that's not our culture, man. That Middle Eastern warm culture would drive people nuts, I think, here in America. It's just, so because we lived in Africa, man, we called it Kenya time. You remember that? We would have these meetings with locals, and Americans, man, we're about schedules, and so we'd have to be there on time. That's how we knew. That's how we expressed care about things. Like we are serious about this because we are on time, and
right.
And so, the Kenyans some of them would show up on time, right? Some of them would show up like after the meeting was done, and they're like, "Hey, sorry, yeah, I ran into my grandma," and
yeah. Well, and also the services in Kenya are like 9 hours long.
Yeah.
And half of it is just like, well, not half of it, but a lot of it is just hanging out and dancing
and singing
and talking to one another.
Dude, they like worship. The worship is like rotating. So one person will sing until like their voice gives out, and then they'll just like get off stage, and then another person will come up and start singing. The pastor will start singing, in the middle of a sermon. You don't really know what he's saying. Because I don't speak a lot of Swahili or Luo, so. But anyhow, that expression of church, I feel like would drive us insane. Like, could you imagine being in an American church for 9 hours?
Yeah, no, but I think what you're driving home here is a good point. It's like we can cross one thing off the list. Like one solution to the issue that people might see is equal outcome. It's like you don't want equal outcome. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So you can't compare. The first mistake you might make is comparing the church to other churches, other cultures, right?
Yes.
Because it's not the same, and it's never been the same, and it won't be the same,
right,
ever again. And so there's that, and then so that's an important thing to take into account. I'll say another important thing to take into account is, man, I'm drawing a blank here.
Yep,
Yeah,
I think that is really important though. eh, to further expand on that, I think that the first step, I do not think that stepping away from the church is the answer. You know what I mean? Like
right.
if you're mad at um at American church, stepping away from it and walking away is not the answer. I think there are, scripture is clear on this. If you do that, you're going to struggle and fall into sin. I mean, that is if you're out of accountability from brothers and sisters. And we talk about church again. Remember that Noah and I, or Howie and I, both agree that that when we talk about the church, we're talking about people coming together as Christians worshiping God. We're not talking about walking into a building on Sunday. We're talking about all the other interactions with the church body. If you're out of accountability, right, that's what we're talking about.
People that believe in God getting together, the same God.
Right. If you walked away from church, turn around, walk back, find somebody that you can hang out with and talk about Jesus. Get straight.
Right. Absolutely.
So what yeah. Are there some things what are your favorite aspects of the American church?
Oh, some good things about the American church is its willingness to go into other nations and preach the gospel and to help. It's like we have the amazing thing about our country is that we have certain needs that are met that allow us, because those needs are met, we're now able to go out and help others.
So what would you say to somebody that disagreed with that? Like there are many individuals who believe that is like a white savior complex, or we're hurting nations. What would you say about that?
Well, the first thing is just to get rid of the race thing entirely, because this country is made up of every single culture in the world. There's immigrants from everywhere, and it's not racial. Missionaries are not racially specific. I went to Kenya with multiple different ethnicities from all around the world, from all different countries, and we all served the same God, and we all went out and served these nations in these countries. So it's not a race thing. It's not a privilege thing. This is our particular system has provided us to have our basic needs met, which is, and unfortunately, there are a lot of people in this world that do not have those same basic needs met. And because we have that, we're able to go out and help the country. If we were to try to suggest an equal outcome for that situation and to make it all even, then I don't think that we would be able to do what we need to do to go out. And I think that the idea is that because we can help.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we're supposed to do. And I think that's the beauty of America, is that we have done something that the rest of the world has not done. It's the great experiment, and we're not just greedy. We're not just keeping it to ourselves. And the church certainly is not keeping it to itself. Incredibly, we have a generous church, I think.
Yeah, I think given what we have, like there are examples of individuals that have been greedy, like Judas is, right, within the church, I believe. But that's not what's important. What's important is we're losing sight of because you remember Christ knew that Judas was stealing from the purse. I mean, that was something that was understood, and it's not like God condemned him. And maybe he did. He condemned himself ultimately. And so there is that inner guilt right in that heart. So, but pulling away from that,
well, that comes down to personal responsibility. It's
right.
like you can sit around and blame. It's on another scale. It's like, you can blame all the world's problems for something,
right?
Or you can try to take personal responsibility and go out and do something about it.
Right.
And if everybody thought that way, you could only imagine what would happen and what would change.
In my time in Kenya, walking around the villages, I did see that there were some missionaries that would come out and they caused more harm than good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so that is a real deal. I think that that's not something that needs to be completely disregarded. What would you say to people that who would attack your missionary gospel preaching argument? What would you say to people that would say that the price of the ticket, that money can be better spent, just giving it away to either people at home or people overseas? Like, what would you say to that person? Because that's a very strong argument against missionaries.
So the money spent on the plane ticket to go out and help
Right.
would be better spent here in America.
Right. Helping the people here.
Yeah, well, there's definitely no shortage of problems in this country.
What would you
And
say
I
to
think
that person
man,
if they were attacking your position? I think one of the things that I would point out, and I'll let you think about that because I already have
okay,
an idea.
all right,
But one of the things I would point out is I really do think that there is an issue with short-term missionaries. I mean, I do. I think people, but at the same time, though, my issue is a little bit different than I feel like a lot of other people's issue with it is. My issue is that I feel like a lot of short-term missionaries go there, wherever they're going, and they don't have a good plan for their time that's the most productive. You know what I mean? The best way to help people. You know what I'm saying about that? Like, you remember we were in the village, and in the village, the fishermen would come in the morning and lay out, or they would catch millions of minnows, like those little tiny minnows. They called them omena, and they would eat them. They would dry them out in nets and eat them. And this missionary organization came out, and they built drying racks. You remember those long drying racks? They were like,
yeah,
and told the chief of the village to charge people to repay, kind of like, for the drying racks. So they had to pay money to dry, I guess, was the idea. And man, we were there like 6 years after that team showed up to build that, and nobody was using the drying racks at all. I feel like I feel like they were still drying fish on the ground. You'd walk past them and there's nothing on them. And that was, in my opinion, maybe do you think that that's an example of a poorly executed plan?
Oh, certainly. You don't want to give them things they don't want. That's definitely. You don't want to go there and build a monument, and that's what a lot of people do. Is they go there, they're like, "You need this," and it's too often it's the case that they might need it, but it's not what they want, and it's not really what they're willing to take responsibility for. I think instead you should ask them what they need, and let them kind of come together and decide. And I mean, there's organizations that are already planted in these countries that have been there for a really long time, and they employ a lot of the local community.
Mm-hmm.
And the local community is passionate about investing in the community, and they know what they want and what they need, and that because they're from there and they're born in the culture and everything, they're going to know how to implement it and do things better. I mean, to keep going out there. I guess what I'm saying is,
here, Noah, one second. I'm having some technical
that,
difficulties, dude. 1 second. Let me figure this out. I'll have this ready to go. All right, I'm good to go. We are still on. No, Noah, 1 second, dude. 1 second. All right, talk again.
all right, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. Hey guys, sorry about that. There were technical difficulties. The mic cut out. I actually had my headphones, our battery powered, and they died, and so I had to switch headphones real quick. And So we're back live. Noah's talking about missionaries in the church. If you missed out on that.
Yeah. So I don't know when it come. I don't know when we cut out or when we stopped. But
We were talking about just really quick about how to be effective missionaries. There were individuals that suck when they go out. They don't have a great plan.
right. And I said that you want to you don't want to build things that they're not necessarily, that they don't feel that they need, or that they might need it but they don't want it. You need to ask them what their needs are, and then go from there.
Right.
Like for instance, like you can build them like a water pump or something, like a well, but if they don't want to maintain it, or they're not like trained to fix it if something breaks, or maintain it to some degree, when it breaks, they're gonna ask you to come back and fix it.
Right.
Or it's not their responsibility. You want them to take the initiative, to take responsibility for it. And if you have to provide materials for that to happen, or money, or just more hands for labor, or whatever it is, that to help them do it. Because a lot of the time, like for instance, there was a pastor in Kenya, and he was from a rural town in the middle of nowhere, like the middle of nowhere. And they didn't even have electricity. And I remember going there one year, and they didn't have any electricity, and we were going around and hanging out with people. And then I went there the next year, and that pastor had paid the company to run electricity out into the middle of nowhere, and everyone in that village had a little light in their hut. Right. And within a year. And it's because he had the resources that those people don't have. And that's what, and when I said we in America we have a lot of our basic needs met, we have resources to go out and go and do that. And there's tons of homelessness in America. It's a huge problem. It's really complicated, and but there's problems everywhere. And I don't necessarily think it's wrong to spend money to go on a plane ticket to go out and help people out there. I think that the idea that the borders is something that limits the necessity to go out into the world and help people generally, especially if you have the resources to do it. I just think it's bad. I think it's a bad argument. I think it's a bad excuse.
Yeah, and I here's one thing I didn't think about, Noah, that I just thought about really quick is, what if, if you're cool with somebody doing something that makes their life better, that makes them better people, that makes them more generous and kind and community driven, if you're the kind of person that likes to see people improve and grow, I really think that sometimes, and this was my experience in my first trip to Kenya, I didn't feel like that trip was about me helping Kenyans, man, because the Kenyans helped me. Like, the Kenyans taught me. They made me a better person. A lot of the Kenyans there, like Mary Mora and Helen, like a lot of the Kenyans that we ran into, they extended to me so much love and kindness and understanding that I wasn't really necessarily there to preach the gospel to them. I was there to kind of wash their feet and become better, be a better person.
To have your feet washed, really.
Yeah, both in both respects. And so, I think my argument against that is, and this is another thing as well, like I feel like a lot of people that go, they don't have that experience, or they don't allow themselves to change and allow the environment to change them and their heart a little bit. And so that's when I kind of talk about people really failing to have a good plan. I think a good plan looks like what is best for me and my heart, and what is best for the community that I'm going into, and how can I not be toxic, right, in that community. Right. So, yeah, I like that point that came from the church being generous and missionaries. What do you think about? I'm curious about this. What do you think about paid pastors that draw a salary? Because a lot of people are upset about that.
Yeah. So, and that's something so we were talking about culture earlier, right? And our culture is industrially a capitalist culture, which I totally agree with. I don't think that capitalism is wrong or bad. That's my opinion, and I think that the culture, I think that they've turned the church into an entrepreneurial thing. I don't think anything's wrong with that because as the issue is it's the heart issue. So it doesn't matter how much somebody makes. It doesn't matter about how little somebody makes. It doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. What is the purpose that they started the church for? And
yeah, that's a good one. So what would let me ask you this. What do you think the purpose of a salary for a pastor is? So why do you think a salary would draw a pastor, or a pastor would draw a salary?
Well, part of it is motivation.
Okay. Motivation for what?
Oh, I mean, it's so there is the same kind of motivation that being kind of driven to share the gospel in that sense. Well, as an entrepreneur, I have my own business, and I'm motivated to make money, or else, if I don't figure out how to make money, then I don't get to have a house or food and things like that, right?
Right. That's
true.
So
obviously the pastor is going to dedicate his life to running a church, and he chose to do it like a business so he can make money, so he can pay for his house and his food and stuff like that while he's running the church. And then, people get upset about the degree to which he had, like the degree to which he is wealthy. So there's pastors that just barely make it by, and they kind of, have an apartment with their 2 kids and their wife, and that's just kind of they got a crappy car, and he's just going to church, and I don't necessarily think that that is the model. I don't think that that's the model, and I don't think that there should be a glass cap to how much pastors make. I think it has to do. It comes down to this. You should look at the money. This is the important part. If you've disagreed with everything I'm saying that I've said before, hear this. This is the one thing you got to hear. You know it by its fruit. So what is the fruit that it's producing? Is a super rich pastor producing really good fruit? Then you shouldn't have a problem with how much money the guy has. If this super wealthy pastor has really, really crappy fruit, and there's all these kinds of bad things that are happening and emerging, it's like that would be reasonable to be upset about. Right. It's not a good thing, and odds are it's not going to be sustainable over a long period of time either. Those things typically don't.
What are the fruit? Because I have some opinions on this, so. But I want to ask you this question real quick. What do you think the fruit, Noah, that you're talking about? What is that?
Oh man, it's so many different things. So,
just give some practical examples. Like if you were to be a part of a church right now, a church body, and you're questioning whether or not your pastor is good. What are a couple of things that you would look for, or do you feel like? Scripture is pretty clear on just like 1 or 2 or 3 things. Something.
Scripture, well, obviously there's the fruits of the Spirit. So if the Spirit's in the church, the fruits of the Spirit will follow, right?
Right.
I think that that's probably true. And then there's obviously
so what are the
scriptures?
What's the fruit? Just a couple of fruits of the Spirit.
Love, joy, peace, happiness, self-control. Those things can all translate into behavior. So like self-control would be, so like you got, I mean, self-control would be, okay, if there's like sexual harassment happening and it's not getting addressed, that would be, I know that happens, but I mean, if it's not getting addressed, or if the pastor is sexually harassing people, or if there's just things happening in the church that are shady and like being looked past, if people are getting manipulated into doing things, it's really sneaky sometimes. Like, it's hard when you're in it. It's hard to identify a lot of the time. But like a lack of self-control would be the sexual harassment, or alcoholism, or saying inappropriate things. I don't know. Those are like little signs and probably tips of the iceberg.
Yep.
But like peace is if there's a lot of like fighting and anger in the church, if people are getting offended, that's not good. Obviously, you don't want that. That's not a fruit of the spirit. It should be
What
addressed
about
properly.
what about fruit with the congregation? So like, so the way that I look at it is like if the congregation itself is angry, hateful, um, impulsive people, then maybe that pastor isn't a good one, right?
Well, I don't think it's the pastor; it's the individuals. It comes down to individual responsibility. So the pastor is a part of it, right? But it's a body, and so the body can either take care of itself or not. And so a healthy church, there's certain ingredients that go into taking care of yourself. If you're not a healthy body, then there's going to be issues. And so if there's
Yeah.
issues, you want to try to diagnose them,
Right.
right? And there's a lot of things that they could be, and it comes down to personal responsibility. So
That's true.
if and so it comes from a lot of it comes from home. So what's going on at home? You
Right. And
know,
this is where this is my point that
well,
I'm trying to make about the congregation and the people. Um, wouldn't it be a pastor? So I really do think it is a twofold issue. I think that what you're talking about is twofold, and I think it's if I was to have a major failing of the American church, right? So if I was to point out one major thing that I'm upset about when it comes to the church that really just bugs me, man, is how can I articulate this in a way that's not like incredibly offensive? And
dude, just
my issue is that people need to submit to godly authority. They need accountability for their lives. They need people that will speak into them and guide them, and they need to be willing to allow people to lead them.
and what you're so and what you're saying is, let me clarify that because somebody might be getting offended by that. What he's saying is not like submit to the pastor and everything that he says. It means that you've got issues and you want to solve them, and you realize that this isn't something you can do by yourself. So you need to go out willingly seek and invite counsel into your life
Right.
from people that whose lives seem to be producing good fruit. You
And
know a
learn to
tree by its fruit, right?
and learn to take advice that you don't like that is good. That's the hardest thing, right? Is when somebody gives you advice for your life that you don't like. It could be anything. Like, hey man, you should probably stop going out to the bars until 4 a.m. because it's really messing up your work. A lot of people on the weekends would be like, that's just my life, right? I'm young. I'm gonna be young. I'm gonna do the things that make me happy. And I'm not
Right.
saying everybody struggles with that. Like, people can go out to the bars and have a good time with their friends and it not be a sinful thing. It's probably a harder thing to do, but anyhow, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that person, if they really have a problem, they need to be able to evaluate themselves and say, you know what, maybe you're right. I'm going to try that out. Maybe that will give me a better life.
Well, and that's the purpose of community in the first place. That's what church
Yes.
is. It's two believers coming together. Part of that is taking on the responsibility to accept accountability.
Yep.
And
I do think though, and I'm bringing that around full circle. No, we're talking about how do we identify a good pastor, right, versus a bad pastor, and how is that pastor deserving of a salary? Essentially, that's what we're talking about. And
right. Okay.
I want to bring it full circle, and I just want to say this, man. I agree with you that there is a certain level of responsibility for the congregation, for individuals to take responsibility over their own lives and pursue a good life, right? A Christ-like life. And there is a certain responsibility there, but I believe the pastor has a certain responsibility for fostering an environment, right? Facilitating people and guiding them into that place of allowing accountability, right? Allowing the growth, just pushing people to become better.
Well, dude, what you're talking about is almost the concept of God the Father, the structure, right?
Yeah.
As a father, you're a father to Eden, and you are raising her, and there's a certain structure that you've developed in the house that you live in, and you raise by, and in a congregation is a growing people, right?
Right.
Individuals are growing. And I mean, you can be a pastorless church. I mean, you can just meet with a couple people and it could be a church. The point of the concept of the American modern church is that there's
By
a
the way,
structure.
though, I don't think that I don't necessarily fully agree, man, because Scripture is very clear on the structure of church. I think that it's not wise to have a church body without a pastor, because Scripture is very clear that there needs to be a pastor.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm not. So I'm not disagreeing with. All right. I don't know enough about that, but
Right.
I
Okay.
believe you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Let's
believe,
move on. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's
But
in I don't have it in front of me. I should have, but I believe it's in Timothy.
okay, that's good.
So
Well, we will put that verse in the description.
all right.
We'll find that and put it in the description.
Um.
So,
This this
but I think that
Go ahead.
they're what the pastors, part of the pastor's role is to create a structure that allows people to have a efficient like communion. It's evolved over the years.
But
You know,
what would be the purpose of fellowship and communion? What would be the purpose of that?
well, the idea is, I guess, to grow, right? To be
Right.
accountable, to surround yourself with people that have the same beliefs,
Hmm.
the same idea, the same ideals, and to it's like you don't just read the Bible once and you're done. You know what I mean? You can read
Right.
it infinitely, and there's multiple layers that you'll understand as you go. It's
Yeah.
archetypal, so it's true in every single way. Literally, metaphorically, psychologically, true in every way, and you get to explore the depths of that and the relationship with God, not just by yourself, but with other people. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be a formative experience, and it's supposed to be like an oasis of
Mm.
where you're allowing and accepting a change in your life with alongside other people, and
Yeah.
it's under a structure that has over many years been curated to do it effectively and efficiently.
Right. Yep.
Right?
Yeah. I agree, man. It's not like I disagree. I'm just trying to challenge some of the beliefs that are around pastors. I believe that today, and this is just my opinion here, is that I believe that today there are a lot of pastors that have incredible amounts of influence that are on a pedestal, that have been elevated above accountability, who aren't fostering fellowship, who aren't fostering community, and
Right.
and development, and people not really fostering a desire for people to be more Christ-like. I believe that those people exist. What do you think about
Yeah.
this, man? I've had this idea that okay, so I have this idea. Do you think pastors would still be pastors if all that the congregation provided for them was a free place to live, right? Big enough for their family, of course. So like a small house, right, next to the church, and food. Do you think they would still be pastors? Do you think they would be more effective?
Oh, what do you mean if pastors did that for people,
No, if
or
there
if
was
we
no
did that for the
if there was
pastors?
no salary for the job, but you get a free place to live, and you get food, and your job is to just be a pastor.
Right? Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I think that that's if you want to do that, you can do that. I don't think that there's one way to do it, and I don't, you know,
Yeah.
I think the idea that the issue is always with the individual.
Yeah.
So and that's what it really comes down to, the individual.
Right.
And even with what you were saying before about pastors being put on a pedestal, that's an individual issue. That's the pastor
Yeah.
allowing themselves to get to that place, and it's all the individuals in the church allowing it to get to that place.
Yes.
And that lack of individual responsibility plays out into that kind of scheme. It's a problem with government. It's a problem with
Mm.
society. It's a problem with church. It's the part of the human condition. So none of
Yeah.
us are perfect. We're all going to screw up, and we need to have grace for that, and act out the symbol of Christ to combat that. It's actually
Right.
exactly what Christ did. What he symbolized is how we should live our lives and treat that. If we all did that, it would be, we don't even know what it would look like. We couldn't even fathom what it would look like. It's not obvious because it just has never happened ever. We've always had the same problems. and,
Yeah.
and you know, and the cliche, everyone always says this, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It's like it's
Mm.
almost like that because the 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 things are the same, the issues are the same, but the language changes, the culture changes, right? Maybe it's time to transcend all that, like Christ did, and to actually
Yeah.
think of it that way
Yeah. I
and
think that
not
that's
blame.
that's pretty good, Noah. How do we be loving, kind, gentle, compassionate people that are constantly growing to be even more loving, even more kind, even more generous and compassionate in any church structure? Like whether our church is a church that meets in a coffee shop or in a house or at a mega church. I think that's when you talk about transcending, that's what I imagine, right? I imagine
Yeah,
that
and
that being the
not to be
individual.
not to be worried about how much money somebody's making, but to be worried about, you know, like if it's a bad church, bad situation, corrupt pastors, or and like a bad congregation or a toxic situation. I mean, the church isn't perfect, and perfect people will never be in the church should not be for perfect people. I
It's not
remember watching.
utopia, right?
It's not utopia, and I remember watching. I remember watching the Father of Lights or Finger of God or one of those movies, and he said that he had a dream where he was in the church and there was like he was the pastor at the front of the church and he looked out and the congregation was a whole bunch of people fornicating and shooting up heroin and doing all these crazy things in the church, and he was like he wanted to like kick them out, but he heard God say, um, this is like, why would you kick them out when this is where they need to be?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that's so true. It's like we're so quick to, so we're talking a lot about the issues at church or whatever, and we're like, there's all these bad things that we want to correct. But I remember Johnny, who was my school leader for when I went to Kenya, and he always said that it goes in this order. First, you belong. Uh, it's belong. Oh man, it's like the order of accept. First, you're accepted, and then you behave. Um, it's like it's not the reverse. Like a lot of
Right.
times we think that to be able to go to church you have to be a good holy Christian, and you have to be behaving a certain way. When really the church just needs to. I say the church. I'm us as individuals need to accept everybody
Right.
exactly for who they are. And I'm not even. I believe the church does this. I don't. I mean, when I say the church, I mean the big giant buildings or whatever. I believe they do it. I think the people that don't do it, I mean, it's obvious people do it and people don't do it. It's mixed up. They're in there. But for those, I guess, those of you who don't do it, you need to accept people and not expect them to behave because
Right.
it's not about the behavior.
Yeah, and that to me is a huge thing, Noah. Actually, I think there is a healthy balance though between having an entire church filled up with people shooting heroin and fornicating in the pews, and that
Well, yeah,
being
you don't
like
want to be an enabler, right?
right, that be your only people. So anyhow, I agree, man. I really do. I think that we need to be more aware of how we are interacting with one another and how we are interacting with people outside of the church. And man, my dogs are fighting in the background. I wonder if you can hear it on the podcast.
No, I can't. You're good.
Oh,
A
that's
question.
good.
I have a quick question for you though.
Yeah,
Okay,
go
because
ahead.
I got stumped. I got stumped on a question you asked me, which is
Okay.
a good thing, right? And I'm sure like a lot of people maybe that are watching this had an answer for it, and I
Right.
just I
I
just
hope they
didn't.
do.
Yeah, and so George, can you please answer the question? Did you? I don't think you did. Um, what if somebody told you, what do you say to the spend the money on the plane ticket uh, on something else other than going to the country and helping somebody? What do you say to that? And
That
if it
that
stumps you,
that's a really good point because I've spent many monies on plane tickets, and my answer to that is that one thing I've learned from you, Howie, is that there is no there it's individual, man. it's case by case. There's no blanket statement. I feel like a lot of people generalize to protect themselves, right? Because they have an opinion and they want to have an opinion, and so they generalize to support their opinion. And it's not. I think there are some people that do waste their money on a plane ticket, right? They do. They. If you want to go on vacation, go on vacation. You know what I mean? But and call it a vacation. If you want to go on a vacation and then sometimes like go head out into the villages to get the feel for how locals really live, that is your own prerogative, but don't call it a mission trip. Don't be confused. So that's one thing. So really figure out what you're doing.
Right. And amounts of money are relative. I mean, like 2 year ago, Howie, $800 was a lot of money. Now, Howie, $800 is not a lot of money. I'm not rich, but it's just changed because it's totally relative to your situation. So it's
so fluid. It's so fluid. You know, money is such a fluid thing. There's always going to be money. And so I think that's one thing. You know, evaluate your heart and why you're going and call it what it is. Don't be disillusioned and don't put yourself on a pedestal. Don't give yourself a savior complex, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The second part to this answer is if you're going to be a missionary, then go and do what the long-term missionaries are doing. Join up with them so that you are effective and you're a part of something that is lasting. That's so, and that way you won't be wasting your money. Okay, those are my two things. I don't have an answer for this, man. It's really it's a case by case thing. I would love to sit down and talk to people and help them plan out missionary trips, dude. If I had that as a job, that would be incredible because I feel like there is. But don't call a missions trip something that it's not. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and also it's I actually don't know what the definition of a loaded question is, but it's a question that it doesn't have a real answer. It's because it's absurd. Because obviously there's the perfect thing that you could go spend your money on right now. Like you could go on the stock exchange and you could put your money on the perfect investment, and it's going to tomorrow make you $1 million. And then you could take that money and spend it on the next perfect thing at the right time to fix all these problems. And then you can make a decision to do this and make a decision to do that. It's like, it's like the world that we live in is the world that we live in, and there's problems everywhere, and we're not isolated to one problem.
Well, here's another thing too, man. That I just thought about.
Question.
I just thought about this too. You know, a lot of the issues that I found that we ran into in Kenya and that we ran into in Skid Row and Los Angeles and Venice Beach, even here in the Midwest, and I'm sure that all the problems that we have found that need to be worked on can't be solved with money. It's a personal thing, right? There's a way of thinking, there's a worldview, there's a belief system that isn't right. And like if you give an individual that is in poverty $1,000, I'm sure that they're not going to spend it on something great that will improve their life if they do not have financial education.
Well, they certainly won't go out and find the perfect stock and make the perfect million and then go invest the perfect whatever.
Or that's why lottery winners go broke. That's why trust fund babies run out of millions of dollars, right? And so it's a hard issue. So I think you're right. I think it's an absurd issue. It's an absurd question, especially against missionaries, because it's not a money problem. It's a heart problem, right? It's not a money problem.
Absolutely. It's there's way more to it than that, and it comes down to the fruit that I think is produced. It's like, are you going on vacation? Or are you going to make a difference? You're going to help. You're going to help in a way that's effective, or you're going to help in a way that's like, okay, we're helping these people. Because you can do that too. We do that a lot.
Right. You don't know. There's some good literature out there. When Helping Hurts is a good book. It's short, and it has a lot of good information on situations that you can possibly help somebody and hurt them like incredibly.
Right. That is a good book.
Yeah. So When Helping Hurts is a great book. I don't know who it's written by, but look it up on Amazon or get it on an Audible. I would just suggest reading about how to help. We don't know how to help each other naturally. I feel like, we know how to, like, help in some minor ways, but I don't think we know how to change people's lives with money by
Well,
throwing money at them.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we're never going to be able to change people's lives. Only people can do it. It's a personal responsibility thing.
Yeah.
And everyone's problems are way too complicated to throw in a big pile and go, all right, this one thing's going to help all your guys' problems. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And that's, but yeah, so, going back to the church and back to the generosity, I think that the one thing the American church has done well is being generous with the world. And it also transforms. It doesn't just like you were just saying, actually, it doesn't just affect the nation that we're going to and the people there positively, but you bring it home with you, and it changes you. There's a there's a Duke-sized, hole in society, and you got to fill that. And everybody's the same way, and that's the responsibility, and that's the potential, right? The fact that you and I say the word potential and know what we're talking about is almost crazy, right?
Right.
And there's that potential in society. And when you go out and you help and you're not just improving the world around you, but you're improving yourself and you're learning things. And I would say that a big part of individual responsibility is being honest with yourself. And I think that that goes in line with church. It's like people need to speak honestly. People need to speak truth. They need to be concerned about truth. And I know I'm kind of rabbit tailing, but I wanted to bring it around at this point that I'm about to bring up right now. And it's a big problem with the church, not the church, with individuals that make up the church, and a lot of times pastors is religious dogma.
Yeah.
Basically, and what I mean by religious dogma is the way that I interpret the Bible is the correct way to interpret the Bible, and the only way to learn the correct interpretation of the Bible is from the way that I explain it to you.
Right. It's almost like and I think you're talking more about, I think when you say dogma, I think your interpretation of, because there are certain parts of the faith that people would argue that dogma is necessary. Like dogma says that it's important to, a good dogma would be.
Well, let's define dogma.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm trying to think of.
So for me, when I say the word dogma, what I'm saying is not grounded in biblical fact. What you're doing is you're interpreting the fact, but it's not the actual biblical fact. And a lot of the Bible is up for interpretation. A lot of it is not. There's certain things that are very clear. There's certain things that are not. You're taking those things that are not clear, and you are interpreting
creating
them
a system
and claiming your interpretation as truth. Yep. And it's really all molded into an ideology at that point. And so everything fits into nodes in your ideology, and you do it, but there's certain things in the Bible that are absolute facts.
Right.
And so dogma, in the definition we're using, dogma would be not grounded in biblical fact.
Right.
Okay. And there's a lot of people that there's, like, for instance, and see, people will argue this, but I really do think that it's a dogma when people predestination, free will. It's like that's up for interpretation.
Actually, dude, I'm glad that you brought that up. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and so, but that's up for interpretation. But like a dogmatic church would preach, let's say,
right, once saved, always saved, or the other.
Right, and again, we're talking a lot about individual responsibility, and that is the church needs to be a place. It doesn't need to be a place, but the church is like where you're going, right, to learn. And to some degree, you are in charge of what you accept to believe, and obviously, but a lot of the dogmas are like, if you don't believe this, then you're living in sin.
Yeah, you're not Christian.
And you're not Christian, and that's actually where religious dogma becomes dangerous.
Right.
And it's a form of manipulation, actually. And you have to be careful. And one way to recognize manipulation is when you don't feel like you have a way to say no. So if you feel yourself cornered, a lot of, even in the Bible, when Jesus felt cornered or when people were trying to corner him, he'd walk away, and if he felt like he was unable to say no, that he knew he was being manipulated.
Right.
And Joy Dawson wrote a book about that. What was that book called? You read it.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's short. It's like 60 pages or something.
Yeah, Joy Dawson wrote a book. I think it has to be called like Avoiding Manipulation or something like that.
Yeah.
And anyways, and it talks about that. But yeah, dogma in the church is a real thing, and I mean, and they're not willing.
Let's talk about that for a sec. No, let's break that down a little bit. Because I don't want you to. You have a lot of good, opinions, man, and like I said, these are just our opinions. These are things that we're developing. These are ideas that are growing. We're just discussing them to kind of help them grow. Howie and I have been talking pretty much every day for years now about these sort of things, and they have cultivated in us a better understanding of the world and Jesus, and so the reason that we're doing a podcast is so that we can invite you along. And so I want you to know that at any point in time, we're inviting you to join us by commenting or sending us email or tweeting us or whatever. Join the conversation, because we aren't going to solve all the problems, and that's why we're talking about this. And so I'm bringing it back, Noah. Here's the funny thing, man, is I think that there are dogmas in the church that are damaging, because I feel like, in dogma in this sense, as you defined it, as people creating laws, bylaws in the church based off of parts of scripture that we don't know, right? We don't know how the exact interpretation. We're going to die and go up and stand before God and be like, hey, man, what does this mean? Right?
Oh, yeah.
What is this? What did you mean by this? This is why did you curse that fig tree? Like that was weird. I didn't understand that.
Yeah, well, and that brings us to a whole new place. What defines fact? What defines biblical fact?
I kind of want to leave that to another podcast. We can talk about the Bible in another podcast, because that is, we're going to be opening up a door, because right now we're talking about the church, and I think dogma is very important. And
dogma. All right, got it. Good call.
Yeah, because I think that's important. I have this belief, and correct me. I would love for somebody to correct me if I'm wrong. But I have this belief. I am an Arminian and a Calvinist. I am both, and I'm also neither. Right. My Bible school teacher had
an easy way of saying I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, like, when I read it, Calvinist doctrine, right?
Or a hard way of saying.
When I read it, I'm just like, yeah, I agree with that. Like that sounds right. They have scripture to back it up. And then I read Arminian doctrine, and I'm like, whoa, that sounds right. And so then I'm like, well, let's see if we can marry these two ideas and be a moderate in this, because both of them don't seem like either Calvinism, and this is what I'm trying to say. Calvinism and Arminianism, these two scriptural beliefs, right? One of them is rooted in once you accept Jesus Christ and you are saved, once you accept the gospel and you're saved, then you will always be saved. It's always, forever. That can't be taken away from you. That's what Calvinism believes, right? Arminians believe that once you're saved, you have to work your salvation out. You have to do all the right things, or, I don't know a lot about Arminian doctrine, really. But, like, you have to make sure that you're not living in sin and losing your salvation. Okay? Those are the two major points. And there are a lot of other stuff that go with it. And the reason I'm talking about all this is what I feel, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, I feel that this kind of dogma and doctrine, what it does is it builds hedge work, right? It builds this hedge work to where you can invite everybody into it, and now everybody's the same. There's no individualization and judgment, right? There's no, like, looking at somebody and working with them and their individual experience and their life and working with them to become closer to God. It's almost like an excuse in my opinion, to not be in direct relationship with somebody and understand how their life works. And so I think it does try to explain some spiritual mysteries that we'll never know for sure.
Well, it creates a group identity, is what you're talking about, and group
Yeah.
identity is it's just pins you against the other tribe.
Right. It is a form of tribalism, and a lot of things is I don't think I liked my Bible school teacher. He said that I like to I believe like a Calvinist and live like an Arminian, right? And I loved that because I really don't think there's any problem believing and living in either one. I think the problem is that some tribes hate other tribes and they hate other people, and they feel like believing in one is like that determines your salvation, and that's my problem.
Right.
Because you're shutting doors on people that need to be in relationship.
Right. And so as individuals, I think it's up to you to understand that it's okay to entertain an idea without accepting it, as far as like these biblical narratives go.
And if you're in a congregation, dude, and when I say dude, I say dude as in all of you beautiful people. If you're in a congregation that you cannot challenge their dogma or their bylaws, and you can't challenge them and talk about them and be skeptical of them, you have to follow them blindly, I suggest you leave and find a different congregation. I mean, that's just application piece. Don't stay there. You will become dogmatic and hateful, and you'll start pointing fingers at other people and doing the same thing to them.
You'll pin yourself up against other people's beliefs.
Yeah. And one day you're going to experience hardship, and your heart's going to be torn out of you, and you're not going to know where to go, and all you have is dogma, no Jesus.
Right. Absolutely. And that church that is doing that is not the same as every other church in the world as well. Don't walk away from meeting with fellow believers, because there are groups of fellow believers out there that you're going to fit perfectly in. Thousands of different groups. And millions and millions of people.
In the Midwest, Howie, we have a church on every corner. Actually, I'm looking at a church through my window in my house right now.
Have you ever gone there?
No, I have not.
Dude, you should go.
I know. I should check it out. Yeah, I'm gonna go check it. I failed. No, Howie, you said that, and I really feel like deep inside you just punched me in my soul.
Dude. Hey, let me even the playing field here, dude. The last time I went to church, I go like, oh man, I do not go to church very often. I don't go to the building church, but I do meet with my friends down in Howie and Baltimore, and we talk a lot about these kinds of things. So I guess that would be considered church. And I also hang out with you every day, so we're definitely communing. But we don't have a pastor, so I guess maybe it can't be church, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I agree with that yet. But yeah. So I mean, I'm just as guilty as you, man. There's churches everywhere I've visited. There's a couple right down the road.
Yeah,
but you should go check that church out, man. See what they're up to.
Yeah, and I will, man. And later on, I'll report on my findings of that congregation. It's been kind of foolish of me, really, because it's right. Literally, I'm looking at it. I can throw a rock and break the windows.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't. But anyhow, yeah, I should be a part, and I'll report on that. Noah, we're gonna have to Howie. We're gonna have to wrap this up a little bit.
Okay, all right.
So let's do some review, man. Let's some main points. What did you draw from this conversation, dude?
Main points is that individual responsibility. That's the big one. I think huge. That we need to drive home, and then following that is grace. Because I said forgiveness, but I thought about it more. And what it is grace. It's not just your grace; it's the grace of God.
What is grace? What is grace, Noah? I mean, Howie. Dang, I'm going to be doing this for like the next 10, 15 podcasts.
I don't know, George. What do you think grace is? I'm sorry.
I'm the Duke.
What do you think grace is, Duke?
I think grace is there's a wonderful Latin word or phrase that we use. It's called coram Deo. And what quorum deo means is before the face of God. Like, what do you look like? Where do you stand before the face of God? And then the power and the holiness and the purity, right? Like, what do you look like face to face with that? And I think what grace is understanding that you don't match up, man. And when I say men, I mean all of you wonderful men and women. You don't match up. Your life is like filthy rags, right, to perfection. And that's okay, because God still loves you. And that's what that means. Quorum deo, before the face of God, evaluate yourself. And I think realizing that you'll never be perfect enough to be like God, that God still loves you and cares for you and wants to be in relationship with you regardless. That's grace from God. Yeah. Grace to people is extending that same love and same nurturing that God has given you to other people. Individually, not that stupid blanket statement like, oh, I love everyone. It's like, do you? Do you love everyone? Have you tried? What does love look like, right?
Yeah.
And the first part of love, I feel, is grace. I think it's a huge part of it. So that's what it means to me, Noah. I mean,
that's good.
Howie.
I agree with that. That is also my definition of grace. I don't know, when I say grace, I guess I think like that kind of the way God sees us and chooses us anyways.
Yeah.
Even though we are the way we are. It's like, okay, thank you. but
right.
But more than that, it's like when you think about it, you're like, wow, that's crazy. And
yeah.
And I think that the personal and individual responsibility, because if they go together like this, so you take up all the responsibility and all the burdens that you can, you're still going to fall short. You're still going to fall short, and that's okay. And that's where the grace is.
And that's okay. There. Dude, that's so important. That is fine. Stop reaching for perfection because you're still loved and cared for.
Stop expecting perfection.
Yep. Okay, so, and that's what one of the main things that I took away
that sounded mean.
One of the main things I took away as well, individuals, right? It's every single person. Evaluate them, love them, have grace for them, and understand what they're going through. It's not simple. This is a complex issue. Historians and scholars have been dealing with it forever. When it comes to pastors, if you are standing on the sidelines and you're judging a pastor, and you're messing up, dude, that is not loving. So go out there, talk to them, get to know them, take them out for coffee, right? Buy them lunch.
Figure out how you can serve.
If what's holding you back from being a part of a congregation is the fact that a pastor is drawing salary, right? And I'm being very cautious when I say this because there are instances where I'm just like, there are pastors here in the Midwest that make six figures, like a lot of money. But if that's what's holding you back from being around people that love Jesus and could potentially love you and make you a better person, then you have some inward problems. You have something in your heart that needs to be worked on, right? That's kind of what I got. Because you changed my opinion on that. You know, a long time ago you did. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you did. Another thing is the church is an expression of society, right? The way that we do church is an expression of our own personal culture in our region.
Well, specific, yeah, absolutely. It's specific to culture.
Right.
Too. Yeah. If we took our church and tried to make church the same way we do church here in like another country, it would be miserable.
Yeah, we've experienced that, and it's terrible. We've experienced some really weird, strange Western expressions because, you know, Kenyans were told that this is how church had to be. I've been in churches and Kenyan churches where it was all traditional instruments, and it was wonderful. Then I've been in churches that had like spent thousands and thousands and $1,000 on PA systems, and they had blown speakers, and they're blasting you on full like volume for like 9 hours. And it's like I don't want to judge, but man, I don't know how people sit there for 9 hours listening to it, because it hurt me. I had to stand outside because my ears were blowing. I was bleeding. My ears were bleeding. So anyhow, church is an expression of society, and that's okay to a certain degree. It's church. Every church is different and has its own culture, right? What else, man? What else did you take away from this?
Well, I think the dogma one was good.
Yeah, that was.
To listen, and to when you speak, be open to consider that what somebody else is saying. It's like you don't want to speak in a way that forces people to only have one option,
right?
And basing it in your interpretation and claiming that is the only interpretation. That's dangerous, and it's manipulative, and you need to be careful. You need to be honest with yourself and make sure that you're not doing that. And and you can test your beliefs and things like that as well.
Right.
But yeah, dogma is a big one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, we're running out of time, so you did the intro. I guess I'll do the outro.
All right.
Thank you for watching the Duke and Howie podcast. We're going to be launching a podcast almost every day. I would say every day of the week, at least 5 days a week. And we would love to explore this topic more with you. I'm thinking we should have a different podcast explaining more, because this is a good one. It's a juicy topic. And so we would love for you to join us in the conversation. You can keep the conversation going by tweeting us. We'll have our Twitter link in the description. And tweeting us or commenting and like. So comment, like, subscribe, get us out there. We would love to continue the conversation with people that definitely probably know more than we do in every regard. And so we want our opinions changed. We want them to forever be growing. Christianity has been attacked as not being a free thinking culture, and I just want to bring that back to being a free thinking culture. And so we're going to be wrestling a lot of issues in society, culture, and Christianity. So if you like that idea, also, at some point we are going to have a laugh. And so if you like all those things, go ahead, keep on watching the show, like, subscribe. Have a good night. You're awesome. We love you. Incredible people.